The rhythmic clack of my old mechanical keyboard was usually the loudest sound in my home office, a comforting cadence that punctuated the quiet efficiency of my evenings. It was a sound I associated with focus, with analysis, with the meticulous organization that brought order to the chaos of my professional life. As a dedicated healthcare professional here in Portland, Oregon, I dealt with human fragility, with the often messy realities of illness and recovery. My days were about precision, about evidence, about the unwavering commitment to public safety that had been drilled into me through years of education and practice. I thrived on clarity, on verifiable facts, on the belief that integrity was the bedrock of everything meaningful. But lately, that familiar rhythm had been drowned out by another, far less pleasant sound: the dull thud of an envelope hitting our mailbox, each one an ominous herald of yet another official letter from the Homeowners Association. My neighbor, a woman named Christy, was waging a quiet, persistent war against our peace of mind, one petty report at a time. It started subtly enough: a notification about our recycling bin being left out past the designated collection time. Harmless, I thought, an oversight. I simply pulled it in. Then came the report about my wife's prized rose bushes, specifically a low-hanging branch that apparently encroached 3 inches onto common property. It was absurd. The kids' bikes, left leaning against the garage while they were still out playing just beyond our site, resulted in another missive. We were informed we were in violation of the aesthetics and orderliness clause. Each time I'd sigh, roll my eyes, and dutifully comply, pulling the bin, trimming the rows, moving the bikes. It was an inconvenience, a minor irritation, like a persistent fly buzzing around a picnic. My initial reaction, true to my principled nature, was to seek understanding. My wife, Sarah, and I decided to approach Christy directly. One crisp Saturday morning, with the scent of blooming jasmine heavy in the air, we walked over, an olive branch in hand, a small potted fern, a gesture of neighborly goodwill. Christy answered the door, her expression tight, her eyes, usually an almost unnervingly bright blue, glinting with something I couldn't quite decipher. "Good morning, Christy," I began, forcing a pleasant tone into my voice. "We just wanted to touch base. We've been getting a few HOA notices lately, and we thought perhaps there was a misunderstanding. Is there anything we could be doing differently?" She crossed her arms, her posture stiff, unyielding. "Brenna," she said, her voice clipped, "you just need to do a better job being a good neighbor." The words hung in the air, devoid of explanation, dripping with a condescending righteousness that made my jaw clench. My analytical mind immediately began dissecting the phrase. What did a good neighbor even mean in this context? It was nebulous, unhelpful, and utterly infuriating. There was no room for discussion, no attempt at resolution, only a vague, passive-aggressive indictment. It was a dismissal, pure and simple, and it ignited a slow, simmering resentment within me. The reports intensified. A freshly mowed lawn, still damp with morning dew, was apparently reported as unmowed on Monday morning, merely hours after I had meticulously cut it on Sunday evening. The HOA fine landed on our doorstep before the grass clippings had even settled. Then came the one about our golden retriever, Jasper, barking at 2 in the afternoon. Jasper, a gentle, quiet soul, barked maybe twice a week, usually at a squirrel. But Christy, with her equally yappy chihuahua, walked the path behind our house at precisely that time, and Jasper, in rare moments of exuberance, would let out a woof or two. Each time I was forced to attend 2-hour-long HOA meetings, sitting through tedious discussions about shrubbery and paint colors just to get the absurd fines removed. It was a draining, time-consuming exercise in futility, and it grated on my uncompromising nature. I believed in fairness, in adherence to reasonable rules, not in arbitrary harassment. My motivation, always centered on professional integrity and public safety, now began to extend to a fierce commitment to personal vindication. I craved an end to this torment. This relentless barrage of petty complaints and unwarranted fines began to chip away at my calm demeanor, transforming mere annoyance into a dull, throbbing anger. It wasn't just the money, though the accumulating fines were starting to add up. It was the principle of it, the sheer audacity of someone using a system designed for community harmony as a weapon for personal vendetta. It was the disruption to our peaceful lives, the constant vigilance I felt I had to maintain, the sense of always being watched, always judged. My home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage under the unblinking, critical eye of a single, malevolent audience member. My internal monologue became a constant loop of exasperated questions. Why? What could possibly motivate this? I'd replay our brief, unsatisfying conversation with Christy, searching for a clue, a justification, anything that would explain her bizarre behavior. But there was nothing, only that smug, unyielding expression and the maddeningly vague accusation of not being a good neighbor. The injustice of it all festered, a tiny splinter embedded deep beneath my skin. I wanted answers. I wanted it to stop. I wanted her to understand the profound frustration she was inflicting. As a dedicated healthcare professional, I had always believed in addressing the root cause and diagnosing the problem before treating the symptoms. But Christy was an enigma, a symptom without a discernible cause, at least not one I could identify. My wife, Sarah, was more pragmatic. "Just ignore her, Brenna," she'd say, squeezing my hand during another heated HOA meeting. "It's not worth your energy." But my energy felt inextricably tied to this. My principles, my deep-seated need for fairness, wouldn't allow me to simply let it go. It wasn't just about my peace now, it was about reclaiming a sense of dignity that was being systematically eroded. Then, one early summer evening, as the last vestiges of twilight painted the Portland sky in shades of deep violet and orange, everything changed. I was scrolling through the neighborhood website, a forum usually reserved for lost pets and recommendations for good plumbers. Suddenly, a post from Christy appeared, bold and confrontational. It was a video, a rambling, poorly produced piece of medical misinformation pushing fringe theories about the anti-vaccine movement. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just petty now, this was dangerous. My immediate reaction was a mix of professional outrage and a growing sense of personal validation. This was it. This was the crack in her facade, the opening I had been waiting for, though I hadn't realized it until that very moment. The comments section exploded, a furious chorus of common sense and scientific fact pushing back against her claims. People rightly were aggressive, calling out the blatant falsehoods, citing legitimate medical sources, but Christie predictably doubled down. She responded to every dissenting comment with a torrent of dismissive rhetoric, accusing everyone of being sheep and brainwashed by Big Pharma, and then she dropped it. The post ended with a flourish, a self-important flourish that made my stomach churn. "You should listen to me," she wrote, "because I am a doctor, signed Dr. Christie, last name naturopathic physician." My analytical mind, usually so precise and calm, felt a jolt of pure, unadulterated shock. A doctor. My internal alarm bells began to clang furiously. A doctor peddling anti-vaccine conspiracy theories? This made no sense. It violated every tenet of medical ethics, every principle of public health I held dear. As a healthcare professional, I had seen firsthand the devastating harm caused by medical misinformation and unregulated practices. Patients vulnerable and desperate, misled by charlatans, suffering preventable complications because they chose unproven alternative treatments over evidence-based care. That commitment to public safety, to professional integrity, was my core motivation, the fire that burned brightest within me. And now this woman, this petty tormentor, was not only harassing me, but she was potentially endangering others with irresponsible, unsubstantiated claims, masquerading under a professional title. The anger, which had been a dull throb, now surged through me hot and clear. This wasn't just about my trash cans or my lawn anymore. This was bigger. This was about something fundamental. This was about the truth. It was about protecting people who might be swayed by such dangerous nonsense. And it was undeniably about an opportunity for retribution that felt not just earned, but morally imperative. This was a battle I could fight, not with passive-aggressive HOA reports, but with facts, with verifiable information, with the very principles she claimed to embody. My curiosity, always keen, now transformed into an insatiable hunger for the truth. I needed to know, was she truly a doctor? And if not, what then? Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. The next morning, the anger had sharpened into a cold, determined resolve. The coffee brewed, its aroma a brief comfort in the tense quiet of the kitchen. Sarah watched me, her concern etched on her face. She knew this was different. "What's on your mind, Brenna?" she asked, her voice soft. "Christy," I replied, the name a bitter taste on my tongue. "And her doctor claim?" I recounted the online post, the anti-vaccine rhetoric, the self-proclaimed title. Sarah frowned, a slow understanding dawning in her eyes. "That's not okay, especially with your background." No, it wasn't okay. It was a direct affront to everything I stood for. My initial thought was to simply dismiss it, to write it off as another one of Christie's deluded pronouncements. But my analytical brain, the one trained to sift through data, to question assumptions, to identify patterns, wouldn't let it rest. What kind of doctor is against vaccines? The question gnawed at me. My dedication to public safety, a deep-seated motivation that had guided my entire career, was now directly challenged. I had seen too many patients suffer due to misinformation. This wasn't just a nuisance, it was a potential threat. I started digging, not with a furious, vengeful intent, not yet. My first steps were purely investigative, driven by professional curiosity and a principled commitment to truth. I started with a simple online search: Naturopathic Physician Colorado Regulation. The Reddit post mentioned Colorado, which seemed odd since Christy lived in Oregon, but I didn't let that deter me. I knew people sometimes retained licenses in different states or had complex histories. It was a thread to pull, a data point to verify. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the familiar click-clack, a comforting echo in the quiet room. I landed on the website for the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies, or DORA. It was a labyrinthine site, as government websites often are, but I navigated it with the practiced ease of someone who often had to research arcane medical regulations. I found the section on naturopathy, and there it was, stark and clear. Naturopathic physicians are regulated in the state of Colorado and are required to maintain a license to practice. A shiver went down my spine. This was significant. This wasn't some unregulated fly-by-night profession. It had oversight. It had a licensing board, and that board surely would have a public database of licensed practitioners. I clicked on the license lookup tool. A simple search interface appeared: first name, last name, license type, city, zip code. My hands hovered over the keys. This was it, the moment of truth. My analytical mind meticulously planned the search. First, I'd try Christy, last name for naturopathic physician. Then if that yielded nothing, I'd try just Christy within her supposed practice area and then broaden it to the entire state. I was thorough, uncompromising in my pursuit of accuracy. The first search, Christie last name, yielded nothing. No results found for your search criteria. A slight tremor went through my hands. Okay, I thought maybe a maiden name or a typo in the spelling she used, or perhaps an entirely different state. This was not yet definitive proof of anything, merely a lack of positive identification. But it definitely raised a red flag. I tried a more generalized search, just Christie as a first name in her supposed town, then in the surrounding areas. Still nothing, my brow furrowed. This was becoming increasingly suspicious. It wasn't just that I couldn't find her, it was the completeness of her absence. Most licensed professionals, even those who might have let a license lapse, would leave some digital trace, some historical record. Christie's name was simply not there. This contradicted her online assertion directly. My investigation deepened. I spent hours diving into the nuances of naturopathic medicine, its scope of practice, its historical context. I read articles, both supportive and critical, trying to understand the full landscape. One article, linked on the Reddit post and published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, or JAMA, outlined concerns about naturopathy, particularly regarding its scientific basis and potential for patient harm when practiced outside of evidence-based guidelines. It was a 13-year-old article, but its points were still remarkably relevant, addressing the very issues of whole-person treatment versus well-researched medical best practices that Christie seemed to conflate. My motivation, the protection of public safety, flared with renewed intensity. I meticulously documented everything. Screenshots of Christie's inflammatory online post, specifically highlighting her doctor's signature. Screenshots of my search results on the Colorado DORA website, clearly showing no results found. I even took a screenshot of the DORA page that explicitly stated naturopathic physicians required a license in Colorado and the link to their online reporting tool. My analytical precision was in overdrive, building an undeniable case. The realization settled in my gut like a cold stone. Christie wasn't just a petty neighbor. She was a fraud, and a potentially dangerous one at that, using a false professional title to lend credibility to harmful misinformation. My principled nature demanded action. My ethical catalyst role, which had been simmering beneath the surface, now ignited into a fierce flame. This was no longer just about getting revenge for the HOA reports, though that certainly fueled the fire. This was about something far more significant: professional integrity and public safety. This was about ensuring that people weren't misled by someone falsely claiming medical authority. I stared at the online reporting tool link. My finger hovered over it. Was this really the path I wanted to take? It felt serious, irrevocable, but what choice did I have? To let her continue to spread potentially harmful information, cloaked in a stolen authority, would be a dereliction of my own ethical duties as a healthcare professional. My uncompromising nature wouldn't allow me to stand by idly. The HOA reports had been annoying, but this was different. This was a violation of trust, a dangerous deception. Before I took the final step of reporting her, I decided on a strategic move. I would put the information out there publicly in the same forum where she had made her false claims. It wasn't about shaming her, not entirely. It was about informing the community, about providing the antidote to her poison. It was also, I admit, a test. I wanted to see how she would react when confronted with irrefutable facts. I wanted to give her an opportunity, however slim, to retract her claims before the official hammer fell. This, I reasoned, was also part of my ethical responsibility: to offer transparency, to present the facts for public scrutiny. I carefully drafted my post on the neighborhood website. Every word was chosen with precision, every link verified. I wanted it to be factual, dispassionate, yet undeniably firm. I wanted it to highlight the dangers of misinformation while directly addressing Christie's fraudulent claim. This is a hot-button topic for me, I began, my fingers flying across the keyboard, and because of that and Christie signing her post as Dr. last name, I had to dig some. I paused, reviewing the words. They sounded calm, professional, good. I continued, weaving in my professional perspective, validating the concept of holistic health while highlighting the crucial distinction between evidence-based medicine and unproven practices. I, for one, am a huge fan of including whole-person treatment. I think doctors of osteopathic medicine are wonderful as they work to integrate whole health into the picture with well-researched medical best practices. Naturopathy, less so, which is the problem here. I then included the link to the JAMA article, adding one researched article here breaks down a lot of the issues quite well. It is almost 13 years old, but still quite good at explaining the valid concerns. This wasn't about attacking all naturopathy, it was about the unregulated and unlicensed practice, especially when combined with dangerous misinformation. This was my ethical catalyst role in action. Then came the core of my post: the factual, irrefutable evidence. I further checked, as Colorado does regulate naturopathy, and I could not find any Christie last name listed there. My thought was that it is entirely possible that she holds a license to practice in Colorado and my search wasn't working, but even just searching her first name or zip code or my town or town near us provides no results for a Christie last name. There are two naturopathic doctors in town near us. I used this search, link to Colorado DORA licensing lookup, linked from this page, link to Colorado DORA naturopathy regulatory page. I hit post. The screen refreshed and my carefully constructed message, brimming with facts and links, was live. A strange mix of apprehension and exhilaration coursed through me. The digital world felt charged with anticipation. What would happen now? Would she respond with more bluster? Would she deny it? Or would she simply disappear? The suspense was palpable. This was the promising element of the struggle, promising a direct confrontation. I waited. The minutes stretched into an hour, then two. My phone, usually silent in the evenings, felt like a ticking bomb. I tried to focus on other things, but my mind kept drifting back to the neighborhood forum, imagining Christie's reaction, picturing her face as she read my meticulously researched post. Would her blue eyes narrow in anger? Would panic spread across her features? The thought was strangely satisfying. Then a notification, my heart leaped. Christie had responded, but it wasn't a rebuttal or an angry retort. It was a single, curt message. This post has been locked for further comments due to inflammatory content. Locked, not deleted, not yet, but locked. That was a small victory, a mini payoff. It meant she couldn't refute my claims, couldn't spread more misinformation. It meant my facts had hit their mark. A slow smile spread across my face. It was a clear sign of her discomfort, her inability to logically counter the truth, but locked wasn't enough. Locked meant it still existed, a monument to her deceit. My uncompromising nature yearned for more. I continued to monitor the forum, checking every few hours, and then early the next morning I saw it. The entire thread, Christie's original post, my response, all the comments gone, deleted, utterly erased. A surge of satisfaction, hot and immediate, washed over me. This was significant. This wasn't just a locking, this was a complete removal, an act of digital self-immolation. It confirmed her guilt, her panic. She hadn't just removed my post, she had scrubbed her own original, damning words from the internet. This was a clear admission, even if unspoken, that her claims were false, and she was terrified of the consequences. The promising moment of confronting her with facts had delivered a satisfying payoff, her retreat. But the larger question remained, was this enough? My motivation, public safety, still demanded more. She had simply buried the evidence from the neighborhood, but what about the potential harm she could still inflict in person or elsewhere online? This was the point of no return. My principled nature, now fully engaged as the ethical catalyst, demanded that I follow through. I opened the Colorado Dora website again, navigated to the online reporting tool. My hand was steady as I filled out the form, attaching the screenshots, meticulously detailing Christie's claim to be a naturopathic physician, her subsequent public retreat when confronted with evidence, and my inability to find any record of her license in Colorado. I laid out the timeline clearly, concisely. Every piece of evidence, every step of her deception was now officially documented and submitted to the regulatory body responsible for upholding professional standards. The act of pressing submit felt weighty, like dropping a stone into a deep well. There was no splash, no immediate reverberation, just the quiet click of a digital confirmation. It was done. The report was filed. The wheels of a much larger, slower-moving machine had begun to turn. Now came the agonizing part, the wait. The days that followed were a strange mixture of anticipation and unease. I found myself checking my email inbox obsessively, scrolling through the neighborhood forum for any sign of Christie, any hint of what might be happening behind the scenes. My mind, usually so occupied with the complexities of my work, was now consumed by the absence of news, the silent progression of justice, or perhaps the silent failure of my efforts. My wife, Sarah, noticed my preoccupation. "Are you okay, Brenna?" she'd ask, her brow furrowed with concern. "You seem distracted." "Just waiting," I'd reply, rubbing my temples. Waiting for the other shoe to drop or for nothing to happen at all. The uncertainty was a different kind of torment than Christie's petty reports. Those had been active assaults. This was a passive, insidious drain on my mental energy. Had I done enough? Was my evidence sufficient? Would the DORA board even take it seriously? The questions swirled, leaving me restless and unable to fully relax. My analytical mind tried to predict the outcomes, to calculate probabilities. The DORA board had a clear mandate to regulate licenses. Claiming to be a doctor without a license was a serious offense. My evidence was strong, irrefutable, but bureaucratic processes could be slow, cumbersome, and unpredictable. There was always a chance my report could get lost in the shuffle, or deemed insufficient, or simply take months to process. The thought of all my effort coming to nothing, of Christie continuing her deception unchecked, was a bitter pill to contemplate. It pushed me closer to a kind of despair. Had I just wasted hours pouring my energy into a fruitless endeavor? My uncompromising nature bristled at the thought of failure, especially when public safety was at stake. I reminded myself of my core motivation, protecting people from misinformation. This wasn't just about Christie anymore, this was about the principle. This was about ensuring that medical titles held their weight, that vulnerable individuals weren't preyed upon by those who lacked the qualifications and ethical backbone to truly help. It was a fight worth fighting, regardless of the immediate outcome. This thought, this recommitment to my deeper purpose, pulled me back from the brink of despondency. The summer days turned into weeks, then stretched into a full month. The initial surge of adrenaline had faded, replaced by a dull ache of persistent worry. Christie remained unseen, her usual walks past our house, her dog's yaps, her omnipresent gaze, all conspicuously absent. It was as if she had evaporated, a ghost haunting the edges of my periphery. I wondered if she knew, if the state board had already contacted her. The silence was deafening, filling the void with endless speculation. I tried to focus on my patients, on the tangible impact of my work, to ground myself in what I could control. But a part of me was always listening, always waiting for that sound, the one that would signal the end of this long, drawn-out struggle. My nights were restless, filled with imagined scenarios. I'd conjure up images of Christy receiving the official letter, her face paling, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. Then I'd snap back to reality, reminding myself that it was all speculation. The truth was, I had no idea what was happening. The helplessness of the situation was almost as frustrating as Christie's initial harassment. I had done my part, now it was up to the system, and systems I knew could be agonizingly slow. This waiting period was truly my rock bottom of patience, a trial by fire for my unwavering determination. But I held on, clinging to the belief that justice, however slow, would eventually prevail. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. One afternoon, a little over a month after I had submitted my report, I walked out to retrieve the mail. The Portland air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke, a perfect autumn day. Usually I barely glanced at the junk mail, but something caught my eye. Among the usual bills and flyers, there was an official-looking envelope, government issue, with a return address from the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies. My heart leaped into my throat, a sudden powerful drum beat against my ribs. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled it from the mailbox. This was it, the waiting was over. I tore open the envelope, my breath catching in my throat. Inside, nestled among a few procedural notices, was a single official-looking letter addressed to Ms. Christie, last name. But it wasn't addressed to me. My eyes scanned the page, deciphering the formal language, skipping to the crucial parts. My vision blurred for a moment, then snapped into focus. It was a cease and desist letter. A profound wave of vindication washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees right there on the sidewalk. My entire body hummed with a sensation akin to an electrical current. It was real, it had worked. The meticulously gathered evidence, the careful crafting of the report, the agonizing wait, it had all led to this moment. The letter, dated just a week prior, unequivocally ordered Christie to immediately cease and desist from all activities related to the practice of naturopathic medicine, including but not limited to the use of the title naturopathic physician, the offering of medical advice, and the solicitation of patients, within the state of Colorado and any other jurisdiction where such practice requires licensure. It cited evidence of engaging in professional practice without the required licensure, a direct echo of my report. It stated that failure to comply would result in further legal action, including but not limited to civil penalties and injunctions. My hands still shaking, I walked back into the house, clutching the letter like a precious artifact. Sarah was on a video call in the living room, but she saw my face, the wildness in my eyes, the triumphant tremor in my smile. She ended her call abruptly, her attention instantly fixed on me. "Brenna, what is it? What happened?" I held up the letter, unable to speak for a moment, the words trapped by the sheer magnitude of the victory. It's for Christie," I finally managed, my voice hoarse with emotion. "From the state board, a cease and desist." Sarah's eyes widened, then her own smile broke through, mirroring mine. She pulled me into a fierce hug, and for a long moment we just stood there, silently acknowledging the culmination of months of frustration, anger, and finally profound satisfaction. The letter confirmed everything. Christie's false claims, her deliberate deception, the very danger I had sensed, it was all validated by an official state body. My principled stand, my role as the ethical catalyst, had been justified. This wasn't just personal revenge, this was justice. A fraudulent doctor peddling misinformation had been stopped. The public, at least those who might have sought her care, was now safer. This was the grand payoff, delivering the audience to a state of triumph and satisfaction. Over the next few days, the immediate consequences began to ripple through the neighborhood. Christie's house, usually a hive of activity with various cars pulling in and out for what I now understood to be her illicit consultations, became eerily quiet. Her social media presence, once so loud and opinionated, completely vanished. The neighborhood website where she had once held court with her conspiratorial diatribes became a void where her name once echoed. It was as if she had been erased, not just from the licensing database, but from the very fabric of our community. I never saw Christie again. One morning, a moving truck was parked outside her house, and by the end of the day, her carefully manicured lawn was empty, her curtains drawn, a for sale sign planted firmly in the ground. The silence she left behind was profound, a stark contrast to the constant, buzzing annoyance she had once represented. A quiet sense of peace settled over our home. The HOA notices stopped completely. The relentless, petty surveillance ceased. My mechanical keyboard's rhythmic clack returned to its rightful place as the loudest, most comforting sound in my office. My energy, once consumed by the frustration of constant harassment, was now free to be channeled back into my true passion, caring for my patients, grounded in evidence and ethical practice. But the experience left an indelible mark. It reinforced my conviction that integrity, while sometimes challenging to uphold, was ultimately the most powerful force. It taught me that even the smallest, most seemingly insignificant acts of injustice could hide deeper, more insidious threats. And it showed me the profound satisfaction that came not just from punishing a wrongdoer, but from protecting the vulnerable, from ensuring that truth, however inconvenient, prevailed. My motivation, fierce commitment to professional integrity and public safety, had found its ultimate vindication. And perhaps the most surprising twist of all was not just Christie's downfall, but my own internal transformation. I had always been principled, analytical, and uncompromising, but this journey had honed those traits into something sharper, more resilient. I had started seeking an end to petty torment, but I had ended up safeguarding a fundamental pillar of public trust. The initial annoyance had transformed into a profound sense of purpose, a quiet understanding that sometimes the most effective revenge isn't about causing pain, but about restoring order, revealing truth, and ensuring that those who abuse power, even perceived power, are held accountable. The silence that now hung over Christie's empty house was not just the absence of her presence, it was the quiet hum of justice finally served. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily.